a tent of stitched badger skins baking in the desert sun, a mountain of white marble and gold that blinds the eyes at noon. You cannot start with Solomon's gold or Herod's massive limestone blocks. The place to start is at the very beginning, in the dirt. But the architecture is a brilliant, blinding sleight of hand. Herod is a paranoid, bloodthirsty tyrant who murders his own wives and drowns his own sons. He has no interest in the God of Abraham. He is buying the loyalty of his Jewish subjects. He is building a monument to his own political genius. The massive wooden gates swing open on heavy hinges. The brass instruments blast. The coins clink on the tables of the money changers. The smoke of 1,000 roasting sacrifices rises into the hot Judean sky. The gold is not a reflection of the presence. It is a distraction from the absence. Behind the blinding facade, behind the 80-foot-tall veil that is as thick as a man's hand, the dark room is still completely vacant. The religious machine is louder, richer, and more impressive than it has ever been in Israel's history. And it is completely devoid of the crushing gravity of God. And then, during the Passover festival, a carpenter from the northern hills walks into the marble courtyard. He steps into the deafening noise of the market. He smells the frightened livestock. He hears the merchants negotiating exchange rates in multiple languages. He watches the religious leaders parading across the pavement in their fine robes. He does not bring a sacrifice. He picks up cords of rope. He braids them together. He overturns the heavy wooden tables. He drives the animals out of the courtyard with a violent, physical force. Picture the Garden of Eden. We typically think of it as a prehistoric park, a lush paradise with fruit trees, rivers, and a talking snake. He stands in the wreckage of Herod's masterpiece and makes a claim so outrageous it will eventually cost him his life. To understand what he says next, you have to look at a single Greek word hiding in the text. John chapter 2, verses 18 through 21. The religious leaders are furious. They look at the overturned tables. They look at the scattered silver coins gleaming on the stone pavement. They demand a sign to justify this violence. Jesus looks back at them and says, "Destroy this temple, and in 3 days I will raise it up." They laugh at him. They point to the massive limestone blocks. It took 46 years of backbreaking labor to build this structure. But the detail that changes everything is buried in the original language. In your English translation, the word temple is used for both the building they are standing in and the thing Jesus says will be destroyed. But the Greek text uses two completely different words. When John describes the physical complex, the courtyards, the porticos, the place with the livestock and the money changers, he uses the Greek word hieron. It means the entire sacred precinct, the sprawling public campus. But the ancient Hebrew reader saw something entirely different. They saw architecture. They recognized a blueprint. In the ancient Near East, temples were built on mountains. But when Jesus opens his mouth and says, "Destroy this temple," he does not use hieron. He uses the Greek word naos. Naos is a highly specific architectural term. It does not mean the courtyard. It means the innermost shrine. It is the Holy of Holies. It is the dark, windowless room behind the heavy veil where the kavod, the crushing weight of God, is supposed to reside. Jesus is standing in the middle of the hieron, pointing at his own chest, and calling himself the Naos. He is publicly declaring what the priests have desperately tried to keep secret for 500 years. The stone room behind the heavy curtain is completely empty. The gravity of God has relocated. It is no longer housed in a building constructed by human hands. It is housed in the lungs, the blood, and the vocal cords of the carpenter standing right in front of them. The naos is not a room behind a veil. It is the flesh and blood standing in the courtyard. He is the portable mountain. He is the new Mishkan, the tabernacle walking in the dust of Judea. The violent collision of heaven and earth is no longer happening on a stone slab. It is happening inside a human body. And this is not a one-time metaphor. The word naos is the exact same word the Apostle Paul will later use when he writes to the Corinthians, with water flowing out from the center, decorated with carvings of fruit trees and guarded by fearsome winged beasts. Eden is described exactly this way. telling them that their physical bodies are the temple of the Holy Spirit. He doesn't call them the Hieron. He doesn't call them the outer courtyard. He calls human beings the Naos, the innermost shrine. But a human body can be broken. The religious leaders will eventually take his challenge literally. They will tear down the sanctuary of his flesh. They will nail the new tabernacle to a piece of rough Roman timber outside the city gates. And when that human chest takes its final, agonizing breath, the architectural illusion in Jerusalem violently shatters. The sky turns the color of bruised iron. Noon becomes midnight. Dust swirls in the dry wind. Outside the city walls, iron spikes hold a human body to a rough wooden beam. Inside the city walls, the temple courtyard is deafening. It is 3 in the afternoon, the exact hour of the evening sacrifice. Thousands of pilgrims press together. Priests in white linen stand barefoot on the cold marble pavement. They hold silver knives. They slit the throats of the Passover lambs. Warm blood flows down the drainage channels of the great bronze altar. Smoke stings the eyes. The thick smell of roasting meat and copper fills the air. The religious machine is running perfectly. The system is operating exactly as designed. Outside the walls, the carpenter suffocates. A high place. A river flowing out to water the earth. The tree of life in the center. And at the eastern gate, the cherubim stationed. His lungs collapse. His vocal cords strain. He whispers a final word. He lowers his head. He stops breathing. The true Naos dies. The earth violently shudders. The massive limestone blocks of Mount Moriah grind against each other. And inside the central sanctuary, behind the golden doors, inside the quiet, windowless room, a sound like a thunderclap shatters the silence. The veil rips. It is 60 feet high. It is 4 inches thick. It is woven of blue, purple, and scarlet yarn. It is an immovable barrier separating the holy from the profane. So heavy that it takes 300 priests to manipulate it. It tears from the top to the bottom, not from the bottom up, as if torn by human hands. From the ceiling down, the dark room is flooded with the dust of the earthquake. The empty bedrock is exposed. The terrifying secret the priests have kept for 500 years is suddenly visible to the open air. The room is vacant. The torn veil is not an act of vandalism. It is a divine eviction notice. The physical barrier is permanently dismantled. The system of animal blood and bronze altars is entirely finished. To guard the way, the man and the woman walk the grounds. They are not just gardeners. The Hebrew verbs used in Genesis chapter 2, the true Naos, the human body hanging on the Roman cross, has absorbed the fracture between heaven and earth. Herod's masterpiece will remain standing for another 40 years. The priests will desperately stitch the curtain back together. The choirs will keep singing the psalms. The fires will keep burning on the pavement. But the building is a corpse. The heartbeat has stopped. The architecture of the divine has relocated. But it does not retreat back to the desert. It does not return to a tent of badger skins. 50 days later, a violent wind sweeps through the narrow streets of Jerusalem. The presence of God is looking for a new set of stones. 50 days after the veil tears. The book of Acts records a sound like a violent wind filling a house. We usually frame the story of Pentecost as the birthday of the church. We focus on the tongues of fire appearing over the heads of the disciples, the sudden explosion of foreign languages in the street, the confused crowds gathering in the Jerusalem dust. But to a first-century Hebrew mind, this is not just the birth of a new religion. This is a temple dedication ceremony. When Moses finished the tabernacle, the cloud of fire descended. When Solomon finished his massive complex, the fire fell, and the kavod. For their work are abad and shamar, to work and to keep. You will read these exact same 2 words later in the book of Numbers. Force the priest to the stone floor. Now, the fire falls again. But look at where it lands. It does not strike an altar of hammered bronze. It does not ignite the flesh of a slaughtered lamb. It rests directly on the foreheads of a tax collector, a zealot, a handful of uneducated fishermen, and a group of women. The divine presence is taking up residence. But the architecture has radically shifted. The fire is not consuming a sacrifice. It is crowning a sanctuary. The Apostle Peter, sitting in that very room, will later write a letter explaining the exact mechanics of what happened. He does not tell the early believers to go build magnificent cathedrals of stone and glass. He tells them that they are being built into a spiritual house. He calls them living stones. The Apostle Paul echoes the exact same blueprint when he writes to the Ephesians, telling them they are a structure held together, growing into a holy temple in the Lord. This is the ultimate scandal of the biblical narrative, the terrifying, unapproachable gravity of God, the presence that required a heavy curtain, the presence that could suffocate a high priest. If he entered the room on the wrong day, has relocated into the ordinary, failing, fragile chests of human beings. They are the specific, technical terms used for the Levites, the priests who guard and maintain the holy sanctuary. Adam and Eve are the first priests. Human flesh is the naos. The beating heart is the innermost shrine. The implications of this are staggering. It means that when a believer walks into a silent hospital room, when they sit across the table from a grieving friend, when they step into a fractured and bleeding world, they are carrying the Holy of Holies with them. They are the portable mountain. They are the fragile intersection of heaven and earth, operating in a secular space. The temple is not a geographic destination you visit. It is a divine vocation you carry. For 2,000 years, this living temple has been expanding across the globe, stone by fragile stone, carrying the presence of the Creator into the dark corners of the earth. The languages that were fractured at the Tower of Babel, when humanity tried to build a false mountain of brick and tar to reach the heavens, are finally healed when heaven reaches down to inhabit humanity. But this expanding house of flesh and blood is still just a preview. It is not the final architectural rendering, because an exiled disciple is about to look into the sky and see how the blueprint actually ends. An old man sits on the jagged rocks of a prison island in the Aegean Sea. Salt spray stings his weathered face. And Eden is the first temple. It is a place where the space of God and the space of humanity completely overlap. There are no walls. The roar of the crashing waves echoes against the dark stone. He is the last surviving member of the inner circle. He watched the veil tear. He felt the violent wind of Pentecost. He has spent his entire life watching the presence of God move from buildings to bodies. Now, he closes his eyes. The island of Patmos fades. The sky violently rips open. He is looking at the end of the human story. Revelation chapter 21. He sees a city descending out of the heavens. It is impossibly massive. It shines with the brilliance of crystal and the warm, deep fire of jasper. The gates are carved from solid pearl. The streets are paved with transparent gold. It is the final, ultimate collision of heaven and earth. John walks the perimeter of this city in his vision. He knows what a holy city is supposed to look like. He remembers the massive limestone blocks of Herod. He remembers the brass altars and the smell of roasting meat. So he looks for the center. He looks for the heavy curtain. He looks for the windowless room where the presence of God is securely housed. And he writes down a single sentence that destroys the entire religious paradigm of the ancient world. And I saw no temple in the city. There is no veil. The presence of the Creator walks among the trees in the cool of the day. And human skin feels the exact same breeze. No ziggurat of mud and brick. No tent of badger skins baking in the sun. No cedar beams harvested from the mountains of Lebanon. No 80-foot Herodian veil hiding an empty room. The missing building is not an architectural omission. It is the architectural completion. John writes the explanation in the very next breath. For its temple is the Lord God, the Almighty, and the Lamb. The fracture that started in the dirt of Genesis is finally, permanently healed. The blueprint of Eden is completely restored, but it has grown from a garden into a sprawling metropolis. The river of life flows right down the middle of the street. The tree of life produces its fruit on the banks. There is no sun, and there is no moon, because the crushing kavod of God, the blinding gravity that once forced priests to the stone pavement, is the street lamp of the entire city. There is no need for a tent when the Creator lives in the neighborhood. There is no need for an altar. When the sacrifice is sitting on the throne, there is no need for a veil when there is nothing left to hide. The human project began with a devastating eviction from the sanctuary. It ends with the sanctuary expanding to absorb the entire universe. A dark, airless room behind a heavy veil where nobody is allowed to speak. A city descending from the sky with no sun and no moon. But then comes the rebellion. The fruit is eaten. The trust is broken. And the humans are exiled. They are driven east. The boundary lines are completely erased. The secular and the sacred become exactly the same thing. But until that city descends, until that final sky splits open, we are not living in the conclusion. We are living in the tension. We are walking through a fractured, bleeding world, carrying an impossible weight inside of fragile chests. And that brings the entire blueprint down to a single, unavoidable point. Two humans walked the dirt of a garden, and the very first sanctuary required no walls. A tent of badger skins moved through the desert sand, and the divine presence proved it refused to be stationary. A king built a fortress of cedar and stone, and the crushing weight of God brought priests to the pavement. A high priest sprinkled blood in an empty room, and a religious machine survived the complete absence of heaven. A carpenter stood in the blinding courtyard of a tyrant and pointed to his own chest as the ultimate holy of holies. A human body suffocated on rough Roman timber, and a 60-foot curtain violently tore from the ceiling down. A rushing wind fell on ordinary, frightened fishermen, and the creator of the universe found his final resting place inside human lungs. The cherubim flash a flaming sword, and the door to the first sanctuary is slammed shut. For centuries, humanity wanders in the dust. One blueprint, one presence. But here's the part I keep coming back to. It is that dark, windowless room behind Herod's massive veil, a religious system so loud, so impressive, so heavily covered in hammered gold, operating flawlessly while the center of it was completely vacant. The God of the universe looked at that blinding architectural masterpiece, bypassed the heavy limestone blocks entirely, and chose to tabernacle inside the ordinary, failing bodies of the people standing out in the dust. If you are in a season where you feel like you have to build a monument to earn the divine presence, if you are exhausted from maintaining an impressive religious exterior, while the center of your life feels like an empty room, the veil is torn. The building is empty. The fire has relocated. You do not have to travel to a holy site to find him. You are the Naos. And may the God who refused to be contained by a building, the God who tore the curtain from top to bottom, settle heavy in your own chest today and give you the peace of a sanctuary that can never be destroyed. If this opened something up for you, subscribe. Leave a comment. Even one word helps. Share this with someone who is exhausted by the religious machine. They try to build their own artificial mountains out of brick and tar on the plains of Shinar, desperately trying, and needs to be reminded of where the presence actually lives. Pray for us as we keep digging into these texts, to climb back up to the divine, trying to make a name for themselves. But they cannot build their way back in. The fracture between heaven and earth is too wide. So, God decides to build a way out. And it starts, not with a palace of stone, but with a pile of animal skins in the middle of a wasteland. Exodus chapter 25. Verse 8. The Israelites have been dragged out of Egyptian slavery, and they are standing at the base of a granite peak in the Sinai Peninsula. They are surrounded by stinging desert sand and the absolute uncertainty of tomorrow. Moses is up in the thick, dark cloud that covers the mountain, receiving instructions from a terrifying divine presence. And the instruction is staggering in its intimacy. God says, "Let them make me a sanctuary, that I may dwell in their midst." Same structure, same layout, same terrifying, unapproachable presence. Most people assume the temple in the Bible is just an ancient version of a church. The word your English Bible translates as dwell. Here is the Hebrew verb shakan. And the noun form, the specific word used for the actual tent they are commanded to build, is the Mishkan. If you look closely at the etymology, shakan does not mean to take up permanent, static residence. It does not imply laying down a deep limestone foundation and building a fortress. It means to settle down, to pitch a tent, to take up temporary residence alongside someone else. It is the language of a nomad. It is the vocabulary of a shepherd who drives his wooden stakes into the sand tonight, knowing he will have to pull them up and move tomorrow. And when later scholars translated this concept into Greek, they used an equivalent word that the Apostle John would eventually borrow in his Gospel Eskenosin when he wrote that the Word became flesh and tabernacled among us. That root changes everything about how we view this wilderness structure. We tend to think of ancient temples as massive, immovable ziggurats where humans labored and bled to reach the gods. But this structure flips the ancient worldview upside down, a place where the Israelites went to sing songs, burn incense, and try to get an angry God to forgive them. The creator of the universe commands the construction of a portable mountain, a miniature Sinai made of acacia wood, woven goat hair, and dyed ram skins. The Mishkan is not a destination the people must travel to. It is a presence that travels with them. Every time the cloud lifts, the Levites dismantle the heavy curtains, pack up the golden lampstand, and carry the throne of God on their shoulders through the heat of the desert. The architecture is deliberately designed to be mobile. It is a theological statement that was completely foreign to the surrounding nations. The divine presence is refusing to be geographically locked to one holy site, choosing instead to wander in the dust with a fractured, complaining, and terrified people. For hundreds of years, this tent of meeting serves as the fragile intersection of heaven and earth, through the conquest of Canaan, through the chaotic era of the Judges. The Mishkan remains a temporary, movable habitation, but a tent of badger skins and fading fabric feels too common for a kingdom at the height of its political power. Eventually, a king looks at his own cedar palace, looks at the weathered canvas of the tabernacle. We read the exhausting blueprints in Exodus and 1 Kings. We skip over the dimensions of the altars and the measurements of the curtains, and decides that the God of the universe requires an architectural upgrade. He decides to trade the nomad's tent for an empire's stone. Cedars fall in Lebanon. Limestone is ripped from the earth. Gold is hammered into impossibly thin sheets. 30,000 men break their backs in the quarries. 70,000 haul the raw materials. 80,000 cut the timber in the mountains. It takes 7 long years. Solomon spares no expense. He lines the inner walls with pure gold. He carves palm trees and open flowers into the heavy doors. He places 2 massive cherubim made of olive wood in the inner sanctuary. Their golden wings stretch 15 feet across the dark room. It is a static, immovable fortress. It is the architectural memory of Eden. Solomon gathers the entire nation. He slaughters sheep and oxen. So many animals bleed on the pavement that the text says they cannot be counted or numbered. The noise is deafening. The smell of copper and roasting meat fills the sky. The priests pick up the wooden poles of the Ark of the Covenant. They carry it past the golden lampstands. They carry it past the table of bread. They step into the windowless room at the center of the complex. They set the box beneath the outstretched wings of the cherubim. And then they step back. The cloud drops. The sanctuary goes completely dark. And we assume it is just the architectural history of a religious building. But if you look closer at the Hebrew vocabulary used to build it, 1 Kings chapter 8. Verse 11 records the exact moment the priests drop to the floor. They cannot stand. They cannot perform their duties. They cannot breathe in the thick, suffocating smoke. The text says, "The glory of the Lord filled the house." The Hebrew word used here is kavod. It is a word you will find all over the ancient texts. Its literal root simply means heavy, grievous, burdensome, massive. Kavod is not a shimmering light. It is not an ethereal, glowing aura. It is a crushing physical weight. It is a gravity that forces human knees to the stone floor. The temple is not a monument to Solomon's wealth. It is a container for divine gravity, for a brief, terrifying moment. Heaven and earth, hold together in a building of stone. The fire falls. The sacrifices burn. The people bow on the pavement. The system works. But a building of stone cannot change a human heart. Decades pass. The kings grow corrupt. The priests grow greedy. The altars of foreign gods creep into the courtyards. The blood of the innocent stains the streets of Jerusalem. The divine presence refuses to share space with human exploitation. And then, a captive priest named Ezekiel sees a vision. He looks at the massive temple complex. He watches the heavy cloud lift. He watches the kavod move to the threshold, at what actually sits in the center of the room. At what happens when these buildings are repeatedly ripped apart. You start to see something. He watches the crushing weight of God walk out the eastern gate, over the mountain, and disappear into the desert. The building still stands. The choirs still sing. The daily fires still burn. But the most terrifying thing about the sanctuary is no longer the weight inside it. For nearly 5 centuries, a windowless, 30-foot stone cube sat completely empty in the center of Jerusalem. When the Jewish exiles finally returned from Babylon and rebuild the temple under a governor named Zerubbabel, the physical structure is a fraction of its former glory. The air does not smell of imported cedar. It smells of dust and desperation. The old men who remember the blinding gold of Solomon's era weep at the sight of the modest foundation stones. But the physical downgrade is not the real problem. The terrifying detail hiding in the historical record is what happens when the building is finished. The sacrifices are placed on the altar. The priests stand ready, and the people wait for the sky to answer. Nothing happens. There is no thick cloud. There is no crushing kavod forcing the priests to the pavement. The Ark of the Covenant is missing, lost to the Babylonian siege, leaving only a bare slab of bedrock in the Holy of Holies. Every year, on the Day of Atonement, the religious building reading completely misses. The temple is not a place you go to visit God. It is the violent collision of heaven and earth. The high priest takes a deep breath, parts the heavy, woven veil, and steps into the suffocating darkness of the innermost room. He sprinkles the blood of the sacrifice, but he does not sprinkle it on the golden lid of the ark. He sprinkles it on empty rock. He is performing a pantomime of atonement in a vacant room. If the image of a religion functioning perfectly, while the presence of God is entirely absent, is stirring up questions you have never considered, you're exactly who this channel is for. Drop a thought in the comments and hit subscribe, because every week we go deeper into the text than you knew was possible. So the rituals continue on autopilot. For 500 years, generations of priests wash their hands in bronze basins, slaughter unblemished lambs, and burn incense on a rigid schedule. The choirs sing the appointed psalms. The calendar of festivals turns with absolute mechanical precision. The great tragedy of the Second Temple is not that the building was smaller. It is that the religious machinery survived the departure of the divine. They learned how to operate a holy site without the weight of God. The temple becomes a system of political power, a cultural center. The answer changes how you read every single time humanity tries to build a house for the divine. To find the answer, you cannot start in Jerusalem, and a lucrative economic engine that requires no supernatural validation to keep the coins flowing and the fires burning. They are maintaining a house where the occupant has quietly moved out. But eventually, a ruthless puppet king looks at this modest, empty building, and he decides that a functioning religious machine is the perfect tool to build his own legacy. Hammers strike limestone. Dust chokes the air. 10,000 laborers drag stone blocks the size of modern buses up the steep ridges of Mount Moriah. 1,000 priests are trained as master masons, ensuring that common, unholy hands do not touch the sacred walls. Herod the Great is pouring the wealth of a kingdom into a massive architectural expansion. He builds retaining walls 60 feet high. He paves courtyards large enough to hold 250,000 people. He erects massive colonnades carved from single pieces of white stone. He covers the entire eastern facade of the central building in solid, hammered gold. The first-century historian Josephus writes that when the morning sun hits the front of the building, it looks like a snow-capped mountain catching fire. The glare is so intense that visitors are forced to shield their eyes. It is the most spectacular religious complex in the Roman Empire.